Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Reichert. I am the Executive Director of the MPO Advisory Council, and welcome to this inaugural edition of the MPO Advisory Council's Showcase of MPO Noteworthy Practices. We hope this will be the first of many and look forward to hearing from our three presenters today. And in order to allow maximum time for those presenters, I'm going to go ahead and hand the mic over to Jeff Sheffield, the Executive Director of the North Florida TPO, for introductions and some housekeeping instructions. All yours, Jeff.
Thanks, Mark. Can you hear me? Good deal. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is, again, as Mark mentioned, the inaugural showcase for Noteworthy Practices. Today really sort of acknowledges a several-month change to the process for the statewide MPO Advisory Council, placing more of a focus on the sharing of our noteworthy practices versus time spent more on complicated applications, scoring processes, and more time focused on awarding of noteworthy practices and not really spending the time on the share. What we think we've been able to do in the new structure as well is level the playing field for all MPOs by giving everyone an opportunity to share. So what you're seeing today is the first time for this. The three MPOs presenting today with Emerald Coast, Space Coast, and Palm Beach, frankly, are the first three that have submitted their ideas. What we really want to do in this process going forward is really an opportunity for MPOs, if they are proud of something they are doing and they would like to share that. That's what the goal of this showcase is, to submit their idea. We will calendar them, much like today, and allow the opportunity for them to speak. So we are going to be on a hard time frame for all three of these presenters. They each know their time frames. The goal here, period, is to end at 3 p.m., being respectful of everybody's time going forward. So to each speaker, I would acknowledge that we will be giving you a hint towards the end of your time frame, so we make sure that we all stay on time and respectful of each other. So with that, we are going to get started. Our first presenter, next slide, please, will be Emerald Coast Regional Council. It will be Austin Mount speaking on the 7-layer cake. And each presenter, if you would just speak and say next, that's how we will coordinate the slide movement. Austin, you are up.
Okay, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Mark, and really want to thank Jeff and the team for setting up this process the way that it is. It's something that we identified a while back of being a platform that could be shared across the country. And again, thanks, Jeff, for volunteering to set this platform up and to allow us to go forward. So what we want to talk about today is our project that we have developed. It is called the 7-layer cake. And the reason we called it the 7-layer cake is because there are 7 separate projects, 7 separate programs that we have paired together that, when working efficiently and simultaneously, they can work together to lower fatalities and serious injury crashes. Myself, I'm Austin Mount, the CEO for the Emerald Coast Regional Council, and I have also on the line with us Jill Nobles, who is our project manager and the one that is delivering this project for us. So we'll go ahead and get started, kind of talk a little bit about who we are, what we are, where we are, and then we'll jump into each of the 7 layers. So if we could jump to the next slide. I don't believe I have control, do I? Okay, there we go. So we represent the 3 MPOs in the far western panhandle of Florida. And as you can see here, there are 27 different MPOs in Florida. It makes for a very fun statewide meeting when we all get together and talk about the different issues. But again, we represent the panhandle. Next slide, please. Just a closer look. So we are a regional planning council by definition, and we provide staffing to each of these 3 TPOs. And so we have 2 of them, which are a TMA, and then 1 of them that is a non-TMA. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump into our 7-layer cake. And again, it's 7 different projects, and we're going to start with the very first layer and kind of give a graphic here of all the separate layers. Next slide, please. And show you exactly what these layers are. Many of you are probably very familiar with an individual layer, and some of you probably have the Safe Streets for All project. Some of you might have your own smart regions or data analytics. Some of you I know are engaged in a carbon reduction plan on your own. And then all the way down to the very bottom layer, which is the foundational element of our cake, which is our traffic management center. So we start out at the top in a plan format, and then we move all the way down to the bottom, which is actually in a sticks and brick mortar type foundational element. So this is the image that we have created to be able to easily talk about what it is we are doing. So when you hear 7-layer cake, this is the project, this is our concept, this is our initiative for Vision Zero. Next slide, please. So here's a little bit more information about each of the layers. I'm not going to read this slide, but if anybody was interested, this is our handout version that we have of our 7-layer cake, and it kind of outlines the different timelines. It outlines also the different funding elements and funding sources that we've been able to pair together to make this work. One of the really cool things about this is every one of these projects has either began or will begin very shortly. They're all fully funded, they're all programmed, they're all awarded, and so we're anxiously awaiting the very end when they're all working together, and we can actually see the needle move on serious injury reductions, crashes reductions, and fatality reductions. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with that top layer, the Safe Streets for All action plan. Next slide. So in our region, over the time period of 2019 to 2023, we actually experienced 987 fatalities. And that's just an exorbitant amount of fatalities. Florida is notorious for our fatalities, especially our pedestrian, our vulnerable road user fatalities. And so that is why we've identified safety as our #1 goal. And we have in our performance measures adopted Vision Zero as our overall goal. So 0, setting the sights on that for all 3 of our TPOs, as well as our regional council. So across all 7 counties. Will we actually ever be able to achieve Vision Zero? That is the debate right now. Some of our board members don't think that it's actually achievable, especially when it comes to changing people's behaviors. But we think that in this 7-layer cake concept, that we have actually created a system that might account for bad behavior. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on, but that is in essence the crux of how can you help alleviate crashes and fatalities when it is human behavior problems. Next slide, please. So with our Safe Streets for All action plan, we are underway with that one. We started about 6 months ago, and we are currently looking at the different hotspots. So as you can see, we have some pretty significant areas or corridors that have these the high injury network, as we're calling it. So we're going to be taking those specific corridors and then moving them into the next phase of our project or our cake. Next slide, please. And that next phase or next layer is the Smart Regions plan. So basically what we're doing, again, one plan builds off of another and continues down the progress of our project. So the high injury network, we've identified the areas that have the high crashes, high fatalities. Then we start with the Smart Regions plan. Next slide, please. So we also are going to look at, well, with the Smart Regions, we're looking at technology. So how can technology be deployed on this high injury network to alleviate fatalities, but also to alleviate congestion? So we don't want to completely focus on one specific element when multiple elements can be achieved. So we are looking at congestion. And when we look at congestion, the preliminary data is already indicating that 41% of our delay is at only 20 locations across our entire region. So what technology can we deploy to potentially alleviate some of those delays? Next slide, please. So with the Smart Regions Plan, this is a whole list of the different scopes and the different elements that we are going to be looking at. So we start with the high injury network, then we're going to look at the vulnerable road users, road safety. We can even do parking management, because if we are deploying the technology in this area, then there's no reason that we couldn't capture parking data as well. Energy efficiency, resiliency, when we're looking at trying to, again, save lives, how many of those are lost through stormwater incidents and flooding incidents? So again, deploying technology, feeding back that information to help us make smart, educated decisions, and in real-time fashion. Next slide, please. So the next layer, once we've identified the high injury network, once we've identified the technology that needs to be deployed, then we're going to move into the data analytics portion. So we've got the network identified, we know our locations. Now what kind of data do we need to collect? And what kind of data do we need to analyze to be able to make those effective decisions, whether it be safety, whether it be resiliency, whether it be anything of that nature. Next slide, please. So we are also looking at capturing data that's already existing through existing networks like Waves. And this makes for a very efficient system when you're able to data share and collect the different data through the different collection elements across already existing platforms. And it makes for a very valuable tool when you're talking about, again, decision-making, safety, and the different elements that we're looking at. Next slide, please. So a little interesting little sidecar to the overall process, because our state, and because I think most states are receiving the carbon reduction funds that are aiming to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we are creating a carbon reduction plan that is going to help program those dollars towards technology projects. So all of the 3 layers that we've identified before, we're going to help point this one right back into that process to put carbon reduction dollars into traffic congestion relief that also has a safety element associated with it. So trying to look at things from a holistic standpoint. Next slide, please. So when we look at congestion, again, we already know that 41% of our delay is caused by 20 different locations. But then when we break it out by county, you can see that a couple of our counties, particularly one of them, has a significant hour of delay. Now, most of this is actually caused, or I should say, generated by military. We have a significant amount of military presence, and their shifts or the different types of time of day that they are going on to base and going off of base, combined with a very, very limited access network, is what causes a significant amount of delay. So some of that can be helped. That one is going to be a little bit more challenging, but that is, again, some of the data that we're actually able to collect through this carbon reduction plan. Next slide, please. And then when we look at the cause of congestion, you can see that 50% of the region's congestion is caused by recurrent and other incidents. When you look at signalization and weather incidents, you can see that 14% of that is created by that. So as we continue to start to collect this information, we're identifying what is the serious repetitive problems that we can, our low-hanging fruit, our middle-hanging fruit, and then our long-term identified projects. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next layer, the next phase of our project is plan implementation. So all 4 of the previous layers that we just talked about, now it's time to start putting them in motion. And how we plan on doing that is through, next slide, please, is through different funding avenues and opportunities that exist. So what we've done here is we applied for the SS4A ITS demonstration grant for one of our corridors here. And this corridor is one of our highest fatality corridors in the entire panhandle of Florida. There's a significant amount of homeless population, a significant amount of bad behavior from drivers. And so this is our test bed. This is one that we've already identified that we want to deploy the technology and try to create a system that can account for that bad behavior. So if we've got an adaptive type ATMS network that can account for a speeding vehicle, that can manipulate signal timing, or you've got a pedestrian walking along that corridor that you can deploy smart lighting in a very dark corridor, these are the types of projects that we're looking for. So we submitted just 2 months ago a $10 million request through Federal Highway for the, again, the ITS demonstration grant. And we're hopeful that here in a couple of weeks that project will be announced. If that project is not announced, we are trying to use different sorts of TMA funding, different sorts of federal funds to help implement these projects for that plan implementation element. Next slide, please. So broadband and fiber, that's one of our key components that we have to make this thing function. So we're starting again to get into that foundational element of what we are looking to deploy here. Most of our system right now is operated off of a cellular network, and with a cellular network, you're limited through the different bandwidth, the signal service, and we're even limited on the amount of data that we're actually able to pull over that network. And so oftentimes when we try to pull up the different comms and cameras, they're sitting there buffering and we're kind of left in the dark. So we've identified this as a foundational element of what we need to do first and foremost. Next slide, please. So when we look at our largest MPO that we have, this is the gaps that we have within our network currently. So we talk about plan build out, we talk about infrastructure, the foundation. We have to close these gaps. And so we're working with the department to really hone in on trying to get funding to just simply put fiber in the ground. So we can take those connection devices off of the cellular and put them on what they call the gold standard, that fiber network. Next slide, thank you. And so the last foundational element that we have is our traffic management center. We are wrapping up design on this facility and construction should start here in the next, hopefully 6 months or so. Next slide. And this is a picture of the design of our facility. It'll be constructed in Pensacola, and it will operate our whole entire traffic network system that we have. It'll tie into the state DOT system. It'll also be able to operate some of the other regional TMCs that are out there across our region and to provide backup redundancy. We will be co-located in this facility. We will have staff support that's going to support the traffic management system and operations. So basically every previous layer that we've talked about is going to come into this facility. This will be the heart. This will be the public facing element that people can come in. They can look at the watch room. They can see the different information going on. And so I think this is our last slide, but this is our 7-layer cake. It's a lot to condense down, but if anybody's has more questions, feel free to give them to me. I do have to give another shout out to Jeff Sheffield because Jeff has been a long mentor of mine, and really everything that we've developed here is pretty much already been done by Jeff. And so there's my plug to you, Jeff. Thanks for your guidance and leadership and helping me and our organization follow in your footsteps. Happy to answer any questions.
I think we're good, Austin.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
If we have time towards the end, we will open it back up for questions, but to make sure we get the other two presenters in, let's move on to Space Coast TPO and Abby Hemingway.
Yep. Thanks so much. All right, well, good afternoon. Before I get started again, I just wanted to thank Mark and Jeff for putting on this amazing webinar today, for including this important topic of relationship building and how to tell your story. So my name is Abby Hemingway, and I'm the Public Information and Outreach Manager for the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization. Shout out to Austin for showing that map. We're on the very right-hand side of Florida, where we literally launch rockets, so Space Coast. And in my role, I'm responsible for leading our public relations and engagement efforts. And I've worked here for about 7 years, and I really love what I do. Next slide. So I know for some of you, public involvement and engagement might be like completely out of your wheelhouse or comfort zone. Many of you might be planners. And so, you might even get a little nervous when the media comes to call in and ask those questions. But my hope today is to kind of share how investing in those relationships can really benefit your organization. So today I'm going to review a successful partnership that we had with our largest local print and digital news media partner, Florida Today. And it really helped elevate our organization and our mission. By working together, we crafted a transportation safety series, which resulted in 15 articles to educate the public about a variety of topics related to not only planning, but really safety focused. Next slide. So before we get into it, I think it's kind of important to set the stage by doing just a little bit of a deep dive into where we are with news media right now. So I'm sure this comes to no surprise to any of you on the call. It only takes one scroll of our finger these days to see how inundated the average person is with news. And it's no surprise that, 86% of adults get their news from their digital devices now. And so with the rise of digital use and specifically social media, news is shifting. Anyone with a cell phone now can be a rogue reporter. And with this shift comes the question of reliable and trusted news sources. So, even in your own jurisdictions, I'm sure you've seen on social media when there's transportation projects or construction projects happening, you have your keyboard cowboys get in there and start typing comments, and people start to believe what they're fed online without kind of doing their own homework or educating themselves. So now even more so is really the time to ensure that the right message is out there when it comes to planning organizations, but it's really, really tough. Everyone wants their content covered by the news. We're competing for attention. Public agencies aren't as, exciting. News agencies are understaffed, and the journalists are really under tight constraints as well. So they have to be really picky and choosy about the topics that they cover. You got to be brief and to the point and really kind of grab their attention. So, the long and short of it is, in a world kind of saturated with news, capturing any public attention can be a daunting task, but especially for a government agency. Next slide. So in April, Florida Today actually approached us, and this is because of the relationship that we had previously built with them. I'm going to touch on some tips on how to do that. So our beat reporter, who normally works with us on transportation projects, he recommended that the editors reach out to us, and they said they wanted to work on a transportation safety series that, of course, they had already seen in South Florida, one of their competitors had done. And so they got this idea that they wanted to do something similar, and they wanted to run it basically the end of Memorial Day week. So they had seen that this similar campaign in the South Florida had tracked very well, had received lots of clicks, and had really engaged the audience in that jurisdiction. So before we met with them, I wanted to be sure that we addressed our main challenge to make sure, of course, we wanted to partner with them, but we wanted to make sure that our story got told as well. And, many of us on here already know this. Public citizens have a preconceived idea about government, right? And federal agencies, which can sometimes put us between a rock and a hard place. So, you're wasting taxpayer dollars, you're not transparent. And so sometimes it's really hard to know where to even begin or how to start. So, and another thing too is that the public understanding of traffic safety so often focuses on isolated crash incidents, right, that are now unfortunately happening daily in our jurisdictions. And so to connect those dots on a larger scale, we really wanted Florida Today to help us shift this entire narrative about traffic safety and really truly educate our public. So you can see on this slide here just some examples of what normally, trends in the news and wanting to change it. Next slide. So this is one of my favorite quotes about good PR and public perception. If you don't like what's being said, change the conversation. As public organizations, it's really our responsibility to elevate our reputation and to change it. If we're not happy with the perception of our agency or organization, it's time to join that conversation and to fix it. So at the end of the day, the news is going to publish the article whether or not you give a comment. And when you create a channel of two-way dialogue with your media partners, often those relationships begin to work for you instead of against you. Next slide. So by understanding the media landscape and challenges, we then met with the editors virtually, and we developed kind of a multi-pronged approach to ensure that our message was strategically communicated. So this is a little roadmap of what we did to set this series up for success. And so, of course, first we kind of built those relationships. I think one of the biggest things for us was making sure that the editors understood what our mission was and the real understanding behind traffic safety. So for example, the two main editors that we met with, they had no idea what Vision Zero was. Understanding that the deaths and serious injuries on our roadways is a public health issue, raising it to that level for them, I think really opened up their eyes. And so it created a sense of buy-in from the editors when we started to educate them a little bit more. And then we also worked with multiple reporters to kind of build these long-term connections, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. As far as content goes, of course, we had to provide them with a lot of different things because it was so many different topics. What I would say here is we are in the world now where reporters don't want to do their homework. um, Oftentimes, they kind of want to be spoon-fed because they are on a tight schedule. They have to get something out right away. And so I've always been proactive by trying to give them as much content, relevant content that I can. So for this instance, we made sure that we provided links, information, graphics, really to try to help set their stories up for success. Of course, humanizing the message for us is a huge focal point. These are personal stories. At the end of the day, the lives lost on our roadways are someone's loved one, and we really wanted to send that message home. And so even correcting language is really important. So we took the time to actually send an email out to all the reporters that we were working on and said, for the sake of consistency and to understand that words matter, it's crash, not accident. Even taking the time to educate and inform the reporters, it can change the whole dialogue. So very important to us. Data, of course, we want to make sure that all these stories had teeth to them, right? At the end of the day, especially when you're talking about transportation projects, when you're talking about traffic safety. And so we gave them access to our high injury network, our state of the system report, provided them with trends that we're seeing. And we also talked about proven countermeasures because in our county, we have a challenge where our general citizens do not like change. We can't even say the word roundabout here without someone being like, oh, roundabouts, diverging diamonds. But we wanted to be ahead of it and start talking about them because I think it's important to correct misinformation. And there's a lot of misinformation about proven countermeasures. So even taking the time to explain that to reporters and provide them with examples. And then of course, outreach, the more information, the better, in my opinion. We wanted to make sure that of course, reporters can come back to us with questions, but it's better for them to have everything at the get-go rather than, going back and forth and back and forth. Next slide. So the outcome, over the course of 3 weeks, we worked with Florida Today, again, numerous reporters, and it ended up in publishing 15 different articles, which increased awareness about traffic safety, most of all Vision Zero, and our own organization. We also were able to work with Florida Today to kick off the series with an opinion editorial, which is not something that happens in the government world. It's a rare opportunity that comes for the government world. So we were really excited that our executive director was given that chance to kind of set the tone for the series along with the editors as well. Next slide. So the articles were published. Now what? Well, sometimes we kind of have to be our own cheerleaders. And I think, again, in the government world, we're probably the worst at that. We want to make sure that it's information out to the public, but sometimes we have to highlight what we're doing as well. So communication is really the engine that drives our public engagement success. So to share this series with our audiences, we posted it on our website, which is the screenshot you see here. We shared specific articles on our social media channels. And then we also sent a list of the full articles with links to our Technical and Citizens Advisory Committee, as well as our Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Advisory Committee and our governing board members. And I think that that's really key because they are, they're representatives in their own communities and jurisdictions. And so now we've equipped them with the context and the background about why we moved forward with this series and why it was so important to us as an organization. And now they can really be our best advocates out in their own communities. Next slide. So we have all these amazing traffic safety topics covered. We developed a strategy with the media to push the information out. The content was published and we communicated the campaign. So what's next? For me, it's kind of not enough to call it a day. We really need to take the time to measure that success or the effectiveness by evaluating whatever metrics, we have. Sometimes we're not going to have how many clicks were on that article. It's not really something that we have access to, but we can do some qualitative evaluation, right? By kind of looking at what topics pique interest, which article had the most comments. Was it negative? Was it positive? We should also take the time to see if there was any opportunity to do a media inventory. And what I mean by that is kind of reassessing, are there gaps? Do we only work with one major news media partner and we're not really partnering with anyone in broadcast or, someone on a smaller level that might be an online publication? There's always room for opportunity to grow that network. Next slide. So to close, I just wanted to leave you with a few helpful tips. First and foremost, plan ahead. Don't wait till there's a major project coming to a close or a public meeting or event that happens in 2 days. Plan ahead and communicate with your reporters. Kind of anticipate that if anything is getting traction from a community, specifically on social media, stay ahead of it. Because it will come to a head and it's better to be in the know than not. Many reporters are already take their leads from social media. They get sent tips all the time from the community. So if you ever hear of something tracking in your community on social media, I would stay ahead of it and reach out to the right, experts in that field, whether they're in your own organization or they're a partner agency. So just making sure that you stay ahead. Timing, really be mindful of timing. Of course, we're not in control of breaking news, but the last thing you want to do is try to work on a campaign or a really good story pitch. And, during the height of like back to school or election season or Christmas, for example, unless somehow you're able to connect those dots, like taking the bus for free to the polls, or maybe there's a new community path that's opening up, before the first day of school that kids are going to take. You can connect those dots and actually build a great story, but it's just, you want to be mindful of timing. And then lastly, be consistent. Reporters' time, like I already said, is so constrained. Make sure you're brief, to the point, provide relevant information, provide video and images, I would say, rather than have them like on Google trying to find something. You want to just provide them with all that content so you know that it's accurate. And then I'd like to add, to make sure that you have one key contact that handles all media inquiries for consistency. I think this has been really helpful in our organization. Of course, that doesn't mean that you won't go to the expert matter in your department or your organization, but having one person kind of be the gatekeeper to make sure that all questions get answered, and also that it's timely and in a timely manner. Next slide. So shameless plug, this is where you can stay connected to learn more about our organization or to see examples of campaigns or contents that we put out there online, and also our website. Next slide. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you again for your time today, and I hope you learned a little bit more about how to invest in your relationships with your local news media.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Abby. That was a great presentation. We are running a little bit ahead of schedule, so if anybody has any questions for Abby, she could take those now. Okay. All right. We will move on to our next presentation. We will hear from Andrew.
Mark, we do have one.
Yep, I see that.
Rosanna from New York.
Yes, hi. Thank you. Abby, I'm interested as a media relations professional here in New York. I mean, we've seen the PR industry change due to the ever-changing nature of communications. How do you reach reporters when no one is reachable by phone anymore?
I really think that depends on your market. Quite honestly, the Space Coast is so small compared to the Orlando area. We have very we're just fairly unique here, and many of our reporters have been longstanding. Prior to this role, I worked for our school board and I had developed relationships there. I also make it a habit, and actually it's coming up on my to-do list for my calendar. I call it a media tour, where I kind of reintroduce myself because there's so much turnover. You have people switching agencies, or some of them are leaving the industry altogether. So every few years, I try to take the time to kind of look up all the, at least for my region, whether it's broadcast or digital media, I try to look up all the different journalists. Is there someone I don't know? And I try to just either like shoot a quick personable email or give them a call if they have a phone number. I'm lucky again that I have some good relationships that have been long-standing for quite a while. But yeah, I just try to take the time to reintroduce myself. And I know it seems like a task, but it comes in handy because it's better to be proactive than reactive, in my opinion. I also, just to add to that, we're also, I'm a part of our local Florida Public Relations Association chapter, and every year we host a media summit, where PR pros and public information officers get to network with media. So that's also been really beneficial to me because I've been introduced to people who I never would have really worked with before.
Hey, Abby, we have a question in the chat. How do you build those media relationships to begin with?
I think when it comes to planning organizations, it's really tough because they don't know what we do. I think that's where we kind of start, right? And so I think it's reintroducing like, hey, I'm, the PIO or the PR person. This is what we do. And you start with maybe like, it's not a lack of content. I'll tell you, like reporters, especially broadcast, like they need something every hour. So it's just a matter of if they can fit you in there. So I would say building relationships, it's going to be on you to reach out initially and say like, this is what we do very briefly, and say like, I'd love a chance to work together. Here's an idea. And pitch them like, I'm just throwing it out there. Like, I would love to partner with you on walk to school day or something, transportation-y related. And I think once you build that, once you see that you can work together one time and that trust is built, then it becomes fluid. And so I partnered with news media on great PR events. And then they've also come back to me and said like, hey, can you pull traffic counts for me? I mean, it goes both ways. So, or, hey, do you know what's happening with this project? Is this an FDOT project or is this a city project? I think you have to establish that trust first just by, putting yourself out there and seeing if there is an opportunity to work together. And I'll tell you, like, they are looking for content.
All right, thank you very much, Abby. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
To stay on track here, let's go ahead and move on to our next presentation. Again, that's Andrew Euler. He's the Deputy Director of Programs for the Palm Beach Transportation Planning Agency. Andrew, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. And in the spirit of what Jeff and Mark were stating, and thanks for putting this on, I focused this on something that was probably not something you would see as award-winning, but really something noteworthy for us, something simple and focused when it comes to product status. Next slide. And so when it comes to product status, why we wanted to really present on this is, as the MPO, we're really that bridge when it comes to government agencies in figuring out the status of projects. Even though we're not the ones who construct projects or the ones who own roadways, we typically are the ones who field those questions. And so with the Transportation Improvement Program that has 200+ projects in our county alone, we want to be able to answer these questions ourselves and look these things up so that we don't have to always go through the product managers at FDOT, right? So what we have with this is really something that elected officials can use, the public can use, our staff can use as well, and can provide that transparency for products throughout the process. Next slide. And so this map on our screen here is our interactive map. It's at palmbeachgpa.org/map. And we provide the projects mapped out that are in our TIP and then also our long-range plan. So fairly straightforward. We actually get a lot of this information from FDOT already. They map a lot of the FDOT projects. We bring in local products for informational purposes, and then we publish it on our map. And then those can all be looked up in our transportation improvement program. Next slide. And so with that, though, in your TIP, you're always seeing when funding is going to occur in outer years for design, right-of-way, construction, or other studies. FDOT also maintains their work program. And so the work program mirrors what we have in our transportation improvement program. And they have a searchable database that you can look for the product number and you can find out more information. So this is a website snippet of what that looks like. And next slide. And so in this work program, you can look up the products that are administered by FDOT and the other products that are in the work program. And when you look them up, they're going to provide you, just like you would see in your TIP, right? It mirrors that. So you'll see the PD&E, the design, construction, right away. And also in that, they have a section in there. And I know this is specific to Florida, but I'll try to make it relevant to everyone else who's on the line. But they have a section for schedule activities. And right now, you can go into that database and you can look up the schedule activities, and it provides more details on the schedule. Also on the screen, if you can look closely, it might be small, but once a product gets to construction, they also pop up that the work has begun and then how many days are left on that contract. So in this example, it just went to contract. So there's over 1,000 days still available for this project that's here in our county. Next slide. And so historically, and this is how we still look it up today, we can go on to this database. And when we look at that scheduled activities, we can then see the breakdown of the milestones for that specific project. And just going through the list, it's going to go in order of sort of when phases occur. This has been helpful to look this up as well as a product manager. On this product, it's Tuck Lee. So one we work with pretty frequently here in District 4 for FDOT. And as you look down the list, you'll see multiple plans for review. And then you can look at production dates, there's a letting date, and then there's construction. So in this example, that last line there says construction. Looks like it's planned to start November 25th of 2024. And then it has an outer fiscal year of 2028 for the planned finish. So that sort of aligns with that last slide we just showed of probably over 1,000 days for this product once it goes under construction. Next slide. And so that's been sort of what's been available to us in the past. More recently, FDOT has been able in District 4 to provide a scheduling report. So it has more details for all that information for Palm Beach County, and they can do it for any county and district. And it goes in order of the milestones. So it's hard to see on the screen here, but it is a pretty cumbersome document. So this is, like I said, there's 200 plus products in our county alone in the work program. This document right here has 16 pages of size 8 font, probably. So it's pretty small, but it does provide all those details if you had it available to you. So we received this, and it's been helpful instead of having to search through the database. But we thought we could try to provide this in a more usable format for what we do at the MPO. Next slide. And so what is something simple we started to do that we felt has been beneficial for our committees and our governing board as well, is that we recreated this spit out into our own format that shows the next 90 days instead. And so we start off with a simple understanding of what those scheduled activities are, going all the way from a beginning scoping checklist that gets sent to all the stakeholders before they even start design. And then it gets into that design process, going all the way to construction. And so in the details there, it says sort of when you get involved in the process as a stakeholder or as a public, right? So for example, most of the time we're only commenting all the way to the initial engineering, which would be the 30% design plans. And so that's when we know that those are sort of the ones we want to look out for. But what we do is we take that data and then we just basically do a simple formula to show us the next 90 days. And then we reorganize that data into the sections that we care about for our transportation improvement program. So we start with the major products that are going to be on the interstate system or the turnpike system. Then it goes down to the major products that we have at the TPA's priorities. And then some of the other priorities we might have with our transportation alternatives program or other programs. Next slide. And so to get to this point in the process, right now we've got it down to about 10 minutes. And a lot of that is really just data cleaning. It's relatively easy to spit this out. The first thing we do is right now we receive the support from FDOT with all the projects in a PDF. We requested that to get into a database instead, so we don't have to go through the PDF. But we export that PDF to Excel using Able to Extract. This is a tool that you can purchase. Originally, we were just using PDF Excel conversion from Adobe. It had its problems with that conversion, so we found it more beneficial for this other program. But once we do that, we bring it into Excel to clean up, and then we run it through an Access database query. And this takes a matter of a few minutes to join it to our tip data, and then we just spit it out as a PDF and add a cover page. Next slide. So that's really the process we have so far. Again, it's using FDOT's data and their work program, and it has plenty of additional data in there. Right now, again, we're getting that as a PDF form. We can also look through it on the website, but in the future, short term, we do anticipate to get this in an Excel for our district, and then long term, hopefully we get it through an API, so something that's a direct link to that data source through the work program, so that we don't have to even run those first parts of the process. And then some additional features that we're hoping to integrate long term is products that are under construction. So we put this scheduling report the next 90 days in our packets for our committees as the administrative items. We also give it to our governing board as an administrative item. And one of their requests is they always want to know the status of products that are ongoing, which is another common question we get from the public and the board members. So going to add that to this spit out in the near future. And then lastly, what the database has a difficult time with right now is what are called LAP products. So those are local agency programs products. So those are the ones administered by locals. That's a little tougher to get the data right because the system doesn't account for those. It doesn't account for those local design timeframes. But trying to integrate that long term is ideal, so we can have more up-to-date information on that as well. But just want to present on something that was simple, something that we felt has been beneficial and really hasn't taken us too much time to administer on the staff side. And I think that's all I have for you. Thanks. This is just those references, links that I mentioned today during the presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any questions for Andrew? And we do have a few minutes left, so if there are any follow-up questions for Austin or Abby, feel free to ask them at this point in time. Austin, just to let you know that I did get a message sent directly to me with a statement that they were very impressed with the projects that are going on in West Florida.
Great, thank you.
It does not look like we have any additional questions. So I just want to give a great big shout out to the three of you for being our guinea pigs today, our very first showcase. So like I said, we hope this is the first of many to come. I would welcome any feedback on how we presented this today. I will send out an email to all the invitees asking for your comments. And just a quick reminder where you can find the Noteworthy Practices portal. It is on the MPOAC website underneath the Noteworthy Practices committee tag. And next slide, please. And that's exactly, that is what the portal looks like for submitting any proposals for our future showcases. I am very impressed with the folks that joined us today. Ralph Yoder with the Florida Transportation Commission. Thank you for joining us today. I know this is probably a little bit different for you, so thanks for hanging in there with us. Also, I noticed that we had quite a few of our MPO colleagues from outside of Florida. I know today's presentations were Florida-centric, but good ideas are transferable. So I hope that you found the time that you spent today well worth your investment. So having said that, I do want to let everybody know that we will be archiving all of these presentations on that same website, and we will be putting this video out as a YouTube video very soon. So again, thank you everybody today for joining us today, and stay tuned. We will we'll let you know when the next showcase happens, and hope you can join us again. So thank you very much, and everybody have a great rest of your Monday. Thank you.